Asking your questions, getting your answers. This is your show. Here's your host, Adam Schrager.
Good morning and welcome to your show for Sunday, July 13th. We continue our Decision 2008 coverage on the program by posing your questions to the Republican candidates vying to replace Tom Tancredo as Colorado's 6th Congressional District Representative. But first, we want to look at presidential politics. Last Monday, we had the opportunity to ask your questions to the presumptive Republican nominee, John McCain.
Our first question comes from Bill Otto, and you touched on this in your town hall. Talk about why drilling in the U.S. helps gas prices.
Well, I think it has an effect. If we can tap into additional reserves, and the oil supply is greater, and we'll be able to have more certainty about a supply. I think that has an effect. I think it has an effect on these futures and speculation, and so do most economists. So I think it's important that we announce that we're going to explore and use the oil and natural gas deposits off our coast if the states decide that's what they want. In Florida, the governor says that's what they want. California, the governor says that's what they don't want. So it's up to the states.
Glenn Cooperman, who was in the audience today, wanted me to ask you this. He said he's seen the commercial you have about talking about the energy, the Lexington project. Talk about the comparison with a call for a nation to action on energy security. Why is that so important?
Because I think it's an environmental and national security and economic issue. Environmental because of greenhouse gas emissions. I believe climate change is real. Economic, obvious. And it's hurting lowest income Americans who drive the oldest cars and have to go the furthest. And of course, from a national security aspect, we cannot be dependent, transferring hundreds of billions of dollars to countries that don't like us very much, and some of that money ends up in the hands of terrorist organizations. That's why we got to make this a national mission.
So much of the conversation, at least from the Democrats, have talked about the speculators. And Rick White writes in from Winter Park saying some energy analysts estimate 30% of the oil price are due to investor speculation. Do you think they need to be reined in and out?
I think there has to be an investigation. I don't think they're the root cause of the problem. I think they may be exploiting the problem. I think the real problem we all know is there's a finite supply that is being more and more demands are being made on as China and India and other countries enter the world's market, and the world's demand for oil increases. But having said that, again, I go back to offshore drilling off the United States of America. If we can uncover and have available larger deposits of oil from our own shores, then I think it will have an effect, both in the short term and the long term. But that doesn't change the fact we've got to get independent of oil. Wind, tide, solar, the battery that takes the car 100 miles, nuclear, the hybrid, the electric, all of those things that are necessary to make 1,000 flowers bloom, and we can do it.
You talked about the economy today and balancing the budget. Gentleman, retired U.S. Army Keith Evelyn wants to know, how do you balance the budget and still run the war on terror?
Which says, Keith, I'm sure knows, or probably knows, that we are spending less as a percent of gross national product than we were doing during the Cold War. As we withdraw from Iraq, and we will withdraw, only this time with honor and victory, the cost will be reduced. If we can be down to 75,000 roughly within a number of years, then we will save $150 billion. But I also have to add to Keith in straight talk, we got big problems in Afghanistan. We got problems in North Africa. We got problems around the world with this radical Islamic extremism. And it's a matter of national security. And as Keith knows from having served, that's our first obligation to the American people.
Dan Sherman wrote, and you talked about Afghanistan. With Afghanistan becoming more combat intensive over the last year or so, do you think we need to shift troops from Iraq to Afghanistan?
Well, I think we need to win both. I think it's not an either-or proposition. If we'd have lost in Iraq and, frankly, done what Senator Obama wanted done, and by the way, he opposed the surge and said it wouldn't work. It obviously has worked. But then we would have had a far more graver situation on our hands, both in Afghanistan and other parts of the Middle East. We would have seen increased Iranian influence. We would have seen an increase in factional fighting, Al-Qaeda establishing a beachhead, we would have had the great risk of a wider war, in my view. So we got to win both.
I wanted to take you back to the economy, and you obviously pointed out your differences with Senator Obama on taxes. And Carolyn Williams wants to know why extend the president's tax cuts, which, in her words, seems to benefit the most of the wealthiest of Americans.
I think it benefits all Americans to start with. Second of all, I think it'd be a terrible thing to increase anybody's taxes at a time when our economy is suffering greatly. I also want to increase the child tax credit from $3,500 to $7,000. I think we need to have business taxes lowered. I think there's a lot of things we can do to help all Americans, but to increase anybody's taxes, such as, for example, in their Social Security taxes or capital gains, 100 million Americans have an investment somehow in capital gains, and I think that would be very harmful to our economy. So I just want to keep taxes low where they are.
Time for one last question, sir. How important is Colorado in this political election?
It's very important. Colorado will be one of the battleground states, and I expect it to be a very hard-fought campaign. I know that Senator Obama has done well here, and I respect and admire his campaign, but I think we need to win, and I believe we will win Colorado. But it'll be very. I think we'll be here a fair amount of time.
Senator John McCain, thank you so much, sir.